this prosecution may be necessary, but it's certainly not sufficient for full accountability for Biden family corruption. I guess I'll open with the verdict against Hunter Biden up in Delaware, Wilmington, Delaware, in federal court. Charges brought by the special counsel, the corrupted and compromised special counsel, against Hunter over his purchasing a gun after falsely attesting that he wasn't a drug addict on the federal form one has to file when purchasing a gun. And on top of that, he was prosecuted successfully for his keeping the gun and having the gun, handling the gun in the state he was in. And the jury basically instantly convicted him. Not literally, but practically speaking, I think they deliberated a few hours. According to the jurors who were interviewed, all but one of them was a holdout, and the one final holdout decided that he should be convicted after a further review of the evidence. So it really wasn't a question about whether or not he was guilty in the end. And of course, unlike President Trump, he received a fair trial. And the process in terms of the court process during that trial worked. But the vehicle or the process to get there was corrupted and compromised. The Justice Department was dragged kicking and screaming into prosecuting Hunter Biden. This was my comment after the verdict. The Bidens are going down in the history books with the inaugural felony conviction of a first family member. Unlike former President Trump, as I said, Hunter Biden received a fair trial. This guilty verdict is an important first step towards accountability for Biden family corruption. The public would do well to remember that the Justice Department was dragged, as I noted, kicking and screaming into this prosecution. Our successful Freedom of Information Act litigation exposing federal special protection and cover-up of Hunter Biden's gun scandal shows how this case could have been brought years ago. And what do I mean by that? They knew in 2018 that Hunter had committed these crimes. They had him dead to rights years ago. And so they sat on the case for years. Politico first reported, I think, that Hunter had the Secret Service and or the FBI had shown up at the store where he purchased the gun almost immediately after it was disposed of in that trash receptacle by his then girlfriend, Beau Biden's widow, Natalie. I think it was Natalie, right? And so that's like October 2018. So Politico reports it out. We get the documents showing indeed something went on. I mean, the Secret Service was, in response to this press report out of Politico, one of the Secret Service officials said, well, maybe a favor was called in. So they've been sitting on it for years. This special prosecutor, as U.S. attorney, sat on this case for years. And if they had had their druthers, the Biden Justice Department would never have prosecuted this and given him a get-out-of-jail-free card for what, by all accounts, is a serious gun crime. Now, I know some of our friends in the Second Amendment area don't like this law, think the laws are kind of stupid, and I haven't researched it that closely, and I respect their views on these issues, so my guess is they're probably right. But if there is an Exhibit A as to why a law requiring at least a disclosure about drug addiction before purchasing a gun, Hunter Biden is Exhibit A. I mean, the way he handled that gun, the way it was disposed of in the frenzied state he was in by his girlfriend, it was so dangerous. He's lucky he didn't get killed and no one else was killed as a result of him having this gun in the state he was in. Now, we're all supposed to pretend that, we should be sympathetic for Hunter and his family. Well, he could have pled out. He could have taken responsibility as opposed to pretending he did nothing wrong. I mean, if he's truly recovered, why isn't he taking responsibility for this misconduct? Instead, he went to a federal trial, and I think evidently hoped through his lawyer to convince the jury that this is a political case, which isn't implausible in some respects, right? It is a political case necessarily. He's the president's son. But it's part of this de minimis approach that the Justice Department and the special counsel has taken to the Biden family corruption. This gun charge, which they initially tried to bury, and which conveniently excludes Joe Biden. Not that factually he was necessarily involved in the cover-up. Maybe he was, I don't know. Why was the Secret Service and the FBI sitting on this for years? Did Joe know about it? I don't know. As a prosecutor, I would have asked the question. And then the tax charges he faces a trial on, again, which only happened because of whistleblowers coming forward saying there was a cover-up, and the federal judge who ended up handling this gun case up in Delaware asking questions about the sweetheart plea deal, basic questions about it, and caused the plea deal to collapse under the weight of its corruption. And so these IRS tax charges are constrained, restricted in terms of how far back they go, because they've let the statute of limitations lapse on charges that would have further implicated Joe Biden, potentially. And there's nothing about the racketeering operation that Joe Biden and Hunter and the rest of the family were running. So this prosecution may be necessary, but it's certainly not sufficient for full accountability for Biden family corruption. And my guess is, and I was on Brian Kilmeade the other day, his radio show, and he played a clip from Fox News where someone suggested this, and I had seen it earlier from Trey Gowdy, and I think Gowdy was right, and the analyst that Brian played for me was right, that they thought that he would just plead out to the IRS case, right? That he would just plead guilty and just wait for Joe to pardon him or commute a sentence after the election. And that to me is quite a plausible scenario. So the only check is whether or not there will be a prosecution of Hunter for other crimes, including the crime, as we discussed here last week, of perjury. There was a criminal referral to the Justice Department and the special counsel, who in my view shouldn't be the special counsel because of his involvement in prior cover-ups, according to whistleblowers and the record, really. The proof is the pudding. The proof is in the pudding. And the pudding was they tried to shut all this down, and they weren't terribly interested in pursuing these issues, even though they were in his bailiwick up there in Delaware. And so President Trump, if he were to be elected, would be in a position to prosecute, or his Justice Department would be in a position to prosecute this referral for perjury by the House of Representatives. And my colleague Chris Farrell has a program we run on our YouTube channel and our social media platforms, On Watch. And Chris interviewed one of the committee chairmen, Representative Comer, who runs the Oversight Committee, about the perjury that Hunter and Joe's brother James engaged in, or are accused of committing. To be fair, they're allegations, but pretty powerful case against them. Let's go to that clip of James talking to Chris.
After the deposition for Hunter Biden and the transcribed interview for Jim Biden, we determined with 65 pages of evidence that they committed perjury. And we caught Hunter Biden in 2 lies. We caught Jim Biden in 1 lie. All 3 lies revolved around protecting Joe Biden. So we did official criminal referrals to the Department of Justice.
And what do you expect that paragon of justice, Attorney General Merrick Garland, to do with your letter?
Well, the Attorney General has a history of charging people and going after people who were held in contempt when the Democrats were in control. He did that with Roger Stone when he was held in contempt of Congress by the January 6th committee for defying a congressional subpoena. So he has a record of taking these congressional referrals seriously. Now, as you and I both know,
Steve Bannon's headed off to jail in a couple of weeks.
He's set off for a different thing as well, right? Merrick Garland, if he wants to prove there's not a two-tier system of justice, has an opportunity to prosecute the Bidens to the same extent that he prosecuted the three former Trump officials.
Now, Garland himself has criminal liability as well as a result of his contempt for Congress. The House finally paying attention to, I hope, Judicial Watch, found Garland in contempt after letting him testify before Congress. He basically said, "Go jump on a lake," and defended all sorts of misconduct. I had a video of him defending what I believe to be the unconstitutional appointment of Jack Smith here. Thomas Massey tore him a new one.
Thomas Massey goes scorched earth on Merrick Garland.
No, I'm not.
Was Jack Smith nominated by President Biden?
No, he was not.
Was he confirmed by the Senate?
No, he was not.
When was the special counsel statute passed?
There is no special counsel statute. There was an independent counsel statute that was expired.
So it expired. So what gives you the authority to appoint a special counsel? You've created an office in the U.S. government that does not exist without authorization from Congress.
Yeah, I've been saying that for years. Mueller was an unconstitutional appointment, and so is Jack Smith. And now Judge Cannon in Florida is going to consider these arguments, I think within the next week or so. I think by the end of June, she's going to have a series of hearings about the constitutionality of Jack Smith's appointment. The concern is that he's not a Senate-confirmed appointee, nor does he report to someone on a day-to-day basis who is. So you don't have that accountability, and it's like, you just can't hire someone off the street to throw someone in jail and run a grand jury. I mean, that doesn't make sense constitutionally speaking, and it's not, if it doesn't make sense constitutionally speaking, it's probably unconstitutional, right? So, appointing a U.S. attorney as special counsel, that may be appropriate. I mean, at least the U.S. attorney has gone through that vetting and that constitutional system of checks and balances, or at least the process where the Senate confirms them and they report to the Attorney General. They're a U.S. attorney. They have certain powers as a U.S. attorney, federally created position. The special counsel position is a position made up out of whole cloth regulatory. It's a regulatory position. I mean, they just issued new regulations creating it at the Justice Department. We're all supposed to pretend they have constitutional authority as a result, and I don't buy that. Thomas Massey doesn't buy it. Garland is kind of oblivious to it as far as I'm concerned, but they're substantial. You had two former attorney generals, Attorney General McCasey and Attorney General Meese, file briefs saying it's unconstitutional. Well, and on top of that, you've got the compromised Attorney General who, for the first time in history, or excuse me, second time in history, because he's the second Attorney General, he's been found in contempt of Congress because he refuses to turn over those audio files of Joe Biden's special counsel interviews to Congress. Now, right now, Judicial Watch is in federal court to get those records. We got a big brief due, I think, in a week or two. Probably less than that now. Fighting for these records. We're likely to get the special counsel audio tapes before Congress does. And sure enough, as I said, the House voted for contempt. It's a strong majority vote given the closeness of how small the majority is, but it looked like pretty much every Republican voted in favor of contempt. And the House was told, again, to go jump in a lake by the Justice Department within minutes, practically speaking. Just a few days later, just before I'm making this video, they issued a letter to the House saying, we're not going to prosecute this. What he's done is perfectly okay. The Justice Department said Friday it will not prosecute the Attorney General after House Republicans voted to hold him in contempt. The Justice Department has a long-standing position of not prosecuting executive branch officials for withholding information, unless they're Peter Navarro or Steve Bannon. Consistent with this long-standing position and uniform practice, again, for Democrats and not for Republicans, the department has determined that the responses by the Attorney General to the subpoena issued by the committees did not constitute a crime. So I got a question. How could they make that decision under the special counsel regulations? Shouldn't they have a special counsel come in and make that decision whether to prosecute and investigate whether a crime was committed there? Isn't the Justice Department and the underlings of Garland, aren't they conflicted? Of course they are. It shows you how it's all rigged to target Republicans and conservatives, Trump supporters, and protect folks like Garland. So when you have the Attorney General acting in a lawless way, and this is just one instance in which he's been acting in a lawless way, it's a national problem that threatens the core rule of law principles that we all rely on to ensure our constitutional republic stands. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.